So I am so excited to be here today, and I'm so excited that Joe Orenstein from Atlas Orange is giving us a little bit of time, and we're going to chat all about what he does, a little bit about his law firm, and just a little bit about real estate law. So again, thank you so much for being here,
Yeah.
Joe. Do you want to tell us at first a little bit about your firm?
Yeah, be glad to. So my name's Joe. Thank you so much for having me. This is
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Our firm is called Atlas Orange. We're a law firm here. We're located in Kernersville, North Carolina. We
Mhm.
serve the entire state of North Carolina. We do primarily real estate closings. So that's what we do. We have some practice that is like estate planning and some other little things, but for the most part, our practice is focused on closing real estate deals. So that's what we do.
Yeah.
We have a very different kind of setup. We
Yeah.
are a little bit different as law firms go. When you walk in, it doesn't feel like a law firm exactly. It's a little bit less formal, a little bit less stuffy, and
Yeah.
that's kind of how we like it. So we work really hard, but we play hard here and have a lot of fun. So it's a really cool place to be.
Yeah. Very nice. I know. And you have such a every time I come in with a client, I'm always so surprised. There's some days I'll come in and it's like a party.
Yeah,
So it's
it's
really fun. But we love that you guys make it so easy for our clients. So that's some of the things that we absolutely love about using your firm. I mean, just the fact that, if our sellers are super busy or our buyers, you guys will come to them, which
yeah.
makes it so amazing. And the party atmosphere is really fun too. So we definitely, are.
It's awesome. We a few
Yeah.
years ago, I've been practicing for 12 years. So I'd
Okay.
started in general practice and kind of moved in as time went, I tried bankruptcy and family law and all the different stuff.
Yeah.
And we got, as I got a little bit older, I realized, oh, like I should be doing what I enjoy. And
Yeah.
real estate law is one of the few areas of law where people walk in the door and they're happy and
Yeah.
excited. And it's a good positive change in their life. And so we were like, let's do that. Let's just do
Yeah.
that. We're going to do happy law. And so a few years ago, we got together and said, look, we looked at the industry and all the law firms were really built on a different and old model. And we said,
Yeah.
let's make this fun. Like, let's make this a different energy. Let's make this a business first and a law firm second. And
Yeah.
that's how Atlas Orange was born.
Well,
This was
very
3 years
cool.
ago. Mhm.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, it's fabulous working with you guys and you're so supportive and we appreciate that. And one of the best things about it is that, I can call you and just get questions answered. Like I was talking to you yesterday about random questions and just the, you being so accessible is
Thank you.
so fabulous. And, you're so supportive with,
Well,
all the,
The funny thing about that, Carrie, is
yeah,
there's a reason for that. I like love sitting down and doing a closing and going over documents and signing paperwork. Like it's fine,
yeah,
but it does not get me up in the morning. Like that, it's boring. After you do it, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 times, you go, okay, I get this. Like I know
yeah,
what these words say.
yeah.
And so it's way more fun to get a phone call and solve a problem and make something work that
Hmm.
wasn't otherwise working. That's kind of, it fills your bucket up. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
for me that's why we're kind of set up that way, is to be engaging and accessible, because that's kind of what we like.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's why we love working with you because you're able to like think outside the box and work with clients that are a little bit more outside the box. And
Yeah.
since we invest in real estate, it's really helpful because I can literally call you and ask you, so what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Does this sound like this will be workable or no?
Yeah.
Or is this
Is
too
this a thing or
crazy?
not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do bring the crazy,
Yep. I love the
deals. And
crazy.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
always
those are my
good.
deals sometimes, but I
So
like
it goes. You take them as they come, right?
Yep, yep. I like to work with everything,
Yep.
so it makes it more fun. So, do you have anything fun that you're doing this weekend?
This weekend I'm going to see some old friends. I grew up here in Kernersville, and so we
Mhm.
went to East Forsyth together, and we've been close forever. And so my wife and I are going down to Charlotte to visit them. They've got
Yeah,
a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they're both pharmacists there. We haven't seen them in a little bit, so we're going to go see them and spend some time with the
yeah,
godchildren and really get some time before it really gets cold and kind of you get into crazy holiday season. So we're really
yeah.
excited about that.
Very cool. Yeah, and I am going to the Chinese Lantern Festival tomorrow night.
Nice. That's so
Yeah. No,
cool.
I'm really excited. It's my sister's birthday, so we are headed down there. We're gonna have fun. And then we also have Pi Day
Oh,
also.
that's
The
right.
same,
Pi Day.
yeah, same day. So it's gonna be a fun time and it'll be a long day, but it'll be a good day. So it'll be
Yeah.
very exciting and we get to give out pies. So
Always
um
the best thing, give out
yeah,
pies.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm so excited about it. And everyone loves it too.
Yeah.
So that's my fun, exciting weekend. Well, let's get down to business. So we're
Okay.
gonna talk about just general real estate funness. So first question I have for you is what role does a real estate attorney play in any typical home buying, or selling transaction?
Yep. So in a typical real estate transaction, people kind of uh, don't really, I think, understand exactly what we do. And
Yeah,
really, our role starts really early on. So once the property is under contract, you've negotiated all those sweet terms, the
yeah.
contract comes over to us. Well, our job starts right away. And basically, what we do is we're going to take that contract, look at the piece of property, and go, where is this piece of property? What is it? Who owned it? And we will do what we call an abstract that is kind of like a book report, like a
Mhm.
research paper on the property itself. And we look back 30 years, sometimes plus 30 years, and go, all right, what has happened over the last 30 years? What kind of liens are against it? What kind of messes are there? Are there any judgments? Are there encroachments? Is there issues with access and all that? And
Yeah.
then we take that, coalesce that into what we call a title opinion. And then we basically will get a title insurance company to agree to insure over the purchase transaction. So that's
Mhm.
kind of happened on the early end. And then as we kind of approach closing day, we're getting
Mhm.
all the pieces in place. And when we talk to like folks we're interviewing for a job or we're trying to explain what we do, like distill it down, it's kind of
Yeah.
like party planning. And
Yeah.
so, if we have, on a typical day, we'll have about 15 closings here. We're doing
Hmm.
basically 15 parties.
Yeah.
And like you're getting all the pieces in place, it's getting the lender in place and getting the real estate agents in place and the seller and the buyer and getting all the parties kind of in line so that day of closing, we throw the party, everything goes great, buyer gets their property, seller gets their money, everybody's paid and happy. And so that's kind of what we do is we're basically professional party planners. It's just a very like technical party, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Very good. That's a good description of it. I love the idea that it's a party because that's actually what we've started calling our transactions because we're like, we don't know what's going to happen at the party.
You don't
Like,
know.
who's going to
Sometimes
come? So
sometimes
let's,
the DJ doesn't show up. Sometimes, like the food is not good, like,
yeah.
but you figure it out. Like that's kind of what we do. Yeah, that's
Yeah, that's so funny that you call it that because that's actually what we started calling like our
yeah.
transactions. So that's awesome. So now we're in North Carolina, and I did have another question because you talked about title companies and so on, and a title insurance. So people get very confused with North Carolina. So what is the difference between working with a title company in a title state
Mhm.
and an attorney? What makes that a little different, and how would you explain that to folks? Because I have a lot of questions when people come from out of state.
Yeah, we get the question a lot, especially out of state.
Hmm.
Sometimes even lenders ask us because they don't
Yeah,
understand exactly. North Carolina is one of the few states in the United States that is a what's called an attorney state. And
yeah,
what that means basically is that the title insurance function and the closing function, so the attorney's role,
yeah.
they are independent. So there's a title insurance company and they insure over your transaction. They say, hey, you own this property, you have the right to own it. If anybody challenges your right to own it, we're going to step in and defend you. And that's one function. And then the attorney's function, which is certifying that the title is good to the title
Yeah.
insurance company. And then beyond that, actually conducting the transaction. So taking it through the escrow process.
Hmm.
That's what attorney state does.
Okay.
And a lot of states, it's all one. So like
Yeah.
a lot of states, everybody, so you got your title, your attorney, and then your insurance is all going to be in the same kind of bucket. For
Yeah.
us, two separate buckets. And the benefit of that is really from a representational standpoint,
Hmm.
the attorney can negotiate with the title insurance company. And
Hmm.
when I say negotiate, I don't mean like get your price down because those
Yeah.
insurance rates are set. Like the price is going
Yeah.
to be the price. But
Yeah.
what we can do is go to the title insurance company and say, hey, we've got this problem will you insure over it? Here are the reasons why you ought to insure over it. And they're going to make an assessment of risk. And the good thing is we can advocate for you independent of their assessment. And so
Mhm.
that's really why it's good there is a separate function, and as between your attorney and your title.
Yeah, very nice. That's a good explanation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So another question is, and this is just going off the cusp, what are the risks of not involving an attorney? What can you do that in North Carolina? Because that is a question I get a lot
Yeah.
in a real estate transaction.
I mean, the main risk is jail, I guess.
Yeah.
You can. I mean, it's so North Carolina. There's a requirement for deeds, specifically the drafting of deeds has to be
Mhm.
completed by a licensed North Carolina attorney.
Yeah.
Now, you can certainly, there's probably some scenarios where you could get a deed that's drafted on the internet and file it and
Yeah.
record it and call it good.
Hmm.
The risks are insane.
Yeah.
First of all, you're not going to have title insurance over that transaction. In other words, if you messed up, and you very well may have,
Yeah.
if you messed up, you're sunk, right? There's no one to come in and protect your right as against a different party.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you're really putting yourself in a position where you have something that's less marketable. So if you're going to turn around and try to sell it to someone else,
Yeah.
they're going to look at you and go, okay, well, who did this deed? It was obviously, you know, pulled off a LegalZoom or some service,
Yeah.
and you're making your property a little bit less valuable in doing it. The
Hmm.
other thing I always try to point out to folks is that in our state, North Carolina, title insurance and attorney costs are the lowest in the nation. I don't think
Yeah.
there's another state in the United States that is cheaper than North Carolina to buy a home in terms of the title function.
Yeah.
So, you know, we work hard here and we do charge a fee for doing it, but
Yeah.
the reality is it's cost wise, you're sinking a couple bucks on the day of closing
Yeah.
as compared to what the risk is if you don't do the right thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I only ask that question just because I do have people
Absolutely.
periodically that are like, man, I could we don't have to get an
Yeah.
attorney. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But I've done this before. And I'm like, really? That's great.
Yeah.
I'm not
I
sure I
mean,
want
you could
to.
fake it. We every once in a while we'll run into transactions where it's like, someone gave a piece of property to their son and their son gave them, a
Yeah,
hundred thousand dollars in
yeah,
cash and in a paper bag. And that's all good and fine. But again, you're running the risk of, title issues or other things that can come up. And I will tell you, we have seen transactions where those things do come up and they will clobber a deal that otherwise would have been great.
yeah,
Um, and it's awful. Having that conversation is no fun. Like it's just
yeah,
not a fun one because usually the person, didn't know or they just didn't really think about the consequences of it.
yeah. No, I get that. I get that totally. Yeah, but just wanted to ask because it's a question I run into. So what do you think like the biggest misconception people have about your role in this position or as being a real estate attorney and during the transaction?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, one of the really common misconceptions we run into is the one I mentioned earlier, which is that we're kind of like paperwork jockeys, and
Yeah,
all we're doing really is just kind of pushing the paper across the table and getting you to sign it.
yeah,
And that's it. There's actually a lot that happens behind the scenes
hmm,
for our firm and really any attorney firm, in terms of making sure all the moving parts are put together.
hmm,
Um, so I'd say that's a big, big misconception.
yeah,
The other one that we fight against because we kind of handle things a little bit differently than other
yeah,
attorneys is a lot of attorneys treat their role in the transaction as kind of a gatekeeper.
mhm,
And for us, we kind of see ourselves as door builders
mhm,
instead. Like our role is less saying no and more figuring out how to say yes.
yeah,
So we really try not to be the impediment in the transaction. We're the ones trying to facilitate it happening.
hmm,
And so that's a little bit of a kind of perspective shift because a lot of attorneys see themselves as the protector of the transaction, and I get that.
yeah,
Um, but we really see ourselves as the folks that can really help make sure the transaction happens in a safe way, a legal way, a secure way, but happens, right? Because that
yeah,
ultimately The people aren't coming to us for us to tell them that they can't buy something. They're coming to us to try to buy something.
Yeah. And
And
figure out
so
how to
let's
buy it.
figure
Yeah.
it out how
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. No, I get that. I'm working on a transaction right now, and I don't know how many attorneys. It's in New York, and that's what we're kind of running into. And we're like, no, we're just trying to help figure this out so we can make sure this can happen. And we got to get to the closing table, and everyone needs to get, to get to where they need to go.
Together. Yeah.
Yeah. So I get that completely. And yeah, and it is a little different. But yeah, that definitely makes sense because a couple of the attorneys in the transaction don't want to talk. So I totally
Yeah,
get
I hate
that.
that.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it is what it is.
Yep.
So one from your perspective, we're gonna kind of change directions
Sure.
a tiny bit. What do you feel like the most important document or clause from an attorney's perspective that a buyer or seller should pay attention to in the documents? Like, what are they looking for
Yeah, so do you mean like on closing day or more like kind of throughout the transaction?
throughout the transaction? What should what is a like big
Thing that gets, yeah.
yeah, big things that they should kind of pay attention to. Just
Yeah, so I will tell you my my strong inclination on this is kind of a general answer, and that's
mhm,
when you are buying or selling real estate, you are making a huge mistake if you are not using your resources effectively.
yeah,
And for me, that means relying on your attorney to give you good advice,
yeah,
or really more substantially relying on your real estate agent
yep,
to, to do right and have good systems in place and make sure that the right thing is happening in the transaction,
yep,
relying on your inspector and the surveyor and taking their advice and asking them for advice.
yeah,
So for me, that's the biggest mistake or thing that gets missed, is that people honestly kind of do the opposite, and
yep,
they will try to overanalyze things and not use their resources to their advantage. I will tell you, I mean, I literally have sat in on over 5,000 closings personally.
wow, hmm,
And I can tell you that the worst closings, the ones where the client is walks away kind of the least fulfilled,
yeah,
are the ones where they sit there and they try to analyze every word on every document to figure out what's going on.
yep,
The reality is that my job, my role is to go through and say, hey, this is important. You need to know this.
hmm,
So, when we're looking at a closing disclosure, we're going to talk about your payment. We're going to talk about escrow. We're going to talk about PMI and the
hmm,
costs and kind of the things that go into it. What we're not going to do is spend time reading the deed of trust together, because the
yeah,
same deed of trust that's written on every single transaction all over the state, you're not changing it if you ask the lender to. So it's really more important to have people in your corner to help you ask the right questions, to help guide you along that path.
yeah,
Um, so that to me is the big one in terms of making sure that you're getting everything out of the transaction and not missing it. The
yeah,
only thing I will add to that, and this
hmm,
is something that most good closing attorneys will tell you, and it will make most real estate agents wince. I will tell you,
yeah,
is you should get a survey.
yeah,
And I will tell you, there's a lot, probably 80% of the transactions or more that we do don't have a survey.
hmm,
Um, Surveys can really save your hide. Right before we got on this call, I was talking with an agent that had a survey done. There was a discrepancy about where the property line is, and the transaction is probably not going to close because it's a good, zero point 0.1 acre less than what was advertised and everybody thought.
hmm,
And so having that survey done, it can be a pain, and it costs a few $100, but it can be a worthwhile exercise, especially if the circumstances warrant it. So
yeah,
um, that
yeah.
would be the only thing I'd add, I guess.
Yeah, no, no, I definitely agree with that. And for sellers in particular, how can attorneys help them protect their interests during the negotiations and the closing? I mean,
On the
how do you
seller
do that?
side,
Yeah, on the seller side, because we've been kind of talking, well, I guess
yeah, we're talking buyers. So the one thing, and this goes on the list of things that are kind of misnomers or myths.
Mhm.
So in a typical transaction, we represent the buyer's side, and what
Yep.
that means is the buyer chooses us, they pay us, and we really, our fiduciary, ethical, legal obligations are to the buyer.
Yeah.
Now, there's a couple different options. If you're a seller, you can hire your own attorney to handle the
Hmm.
transaction, and that's fairly common. The
Hmm.
attorney will complete seller documents and they will review the CD or the HUD when it comes time to closing and help you kind of resolve issues.
Hmm.
Um, or, and in a lot of transactions, this is the case, the closing attorney can help prepare the seller's documentation for them.
Yeah.
And that happens in a lot of cases. We do that for a lot of our transactions. That's an administrative function, so I can't ever give legal advice,
Yeah.
right? And so sellers, when they get into a spot where it's like, hey, what do you advise I do in this situation? It's like, I can't tell you, but I can give you the names of a couple of attorneys who can give you advice.
Yeah.
So really, in terms of protecting and making sure sellers are doing the right thing, the one thing I will say that
Hmm.
we can't give legal advice, but we do have very significant seller systems for our transactions. And what that means for us is I literally have 6 people in my office.
Hmm.
Their job is working with sellers. That's
Hmm.
all they do. They
Yep.
do it all day. They work on making sure they got payoffs. They work on HOA. They work on getting seller docs together. They work on smoothing over issues. Or if you've got 15 sellers that all have to
Yeah.
sign, the
Yep.
logistics of that. That's what they do. That's what we do. So our systems are very much built to be able to help the seller, even though they're not our client. The
Hmm.
reality is it's a party, right? And we said that at
Yep.
the outset. And if one of the key, if the seller is not at the party,
Yep.
it's not gonna happen. It's never gonna get off the ground,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So for us, we spend a lot of time making sure we've got our sellers right and in the right spot.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I call you a lot of times on seller questions
Yeah.
because if we can't get them right, then we can't get the house sold. I mean, when I called you yesterday, I mean, both I
Yeah.
without those pieces for both those sellers, I can't get it. I can't sell the house.
Can't do
So,
it. Well,
nope.
and that's one of the things whenever I'm training new staff, one of the things we talk about is, there are 2 functions for our transaction,
Mhm.
right? One function is, can the seller sell the property? Do they have the
Mhm.
legal authority, the ability? Are they physically able? Are they alive? It
Yeah.
sounds like an obvious question, but like
No.
that's one question. The
Yep.
other question really comes down to the transaction itself and making it happen.
Yeah.
And you can't do any of that unless you have the seller side sorted out. So
Yep.
we love advising on seller issues. And I do, this, and you
Yeah.
do call me. I
Yeah.
tell my agents all the time, if you have a seller issue before you list it,
Yep.
before you run into it, call me. Let's talk through it. Because sometimes it's not a big deal and I can give you the reassurance you need to list it. Sometimes it's a big deal if we need to fix something before you list it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Exactly. Like the 2 questions I asked you yesterday, one of them I just can't list until they resolve the issues. I mean,
yeah.
so, and I hate it, but at least I know it. And
But
so
and it would
yeah.
have been a real awful surprise the week before closing.
Yes.
And I will tell you, we have that conversation once a month with, or probably more than that, with
Uh,
sellers, and it is the toughest conversation why we can't close. And then we feel like the bad guy because we
yeah.
have brought to attention the thing that existed. But that's part of our role is making sure the sellers do their thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is changing the kind of direction a little bit, but I just want to ask you this question just in general because I know you're not a title insurance kind of guy, but when you're running title, what does that kind of mean? Because a lot of people ask me that question, so I explain it, but from an attorney's you probably
Perspective.
explain it better than me.
Yeah.
How can you explain that to folks?
Yeah, so we don't issue title insurance, but we
Yep.
actually deal more with the title than the title insurance company does. The
Yep.
insurance company, all they're doing is going, we rely on Joe to not mess it up, and
Yep.
we'll issue a title insurance policy on that. So our title process, you were talking about our seller team. I've got a
Yeah.
team literally of 10 people, and their entire job is running title.
Wow.
And basically what they do is they go, all right, over the last 30 years, because in North Carolina, there's a statute of limitation of 30 years.
Yeah.
Over the last 30 years, what's happened? Let's
Mhm.
figure out what's happened to this property. I want to know everything about it. What are all the ins and outs? When did it get sold to this person? Did they
Mhm.
spell the name right on the deed? Was it
Mhm.
signed and notarized properly? Was there, when the deed of trust was put in place, did it attach? Did it ever get paid off?
Mhm.
How many, was there a right of way given to the Department of Transportation and how does that affect our lot?
Yeah.
What kind of restrictive covenants are in place that affect our lot? Those things all basically are part of that book report, right? That
Mhm.
what we call abstract here, and it's really
Mhm.
like it's an in-depth research of what has happened with this property. And like I said, I've got 10 people in our office that actually led by my younger sister is our title guru. I mean, she's
Nice.
brilliant. I put her up against any attorney in the state of North
Yeah.
Carolina.
Very
And
cool.
she leads a team of 10 people. They are locked in a dungeon in our basement.
Uh-huh.
And all they do all day is they investigate. We don't really have a dungeon in the basement.
Yeah.
They investigate. All they do is they spend time basically researching, and they love it.
Yeah.
Or at least we tell them they love it and they agree.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, I mean, that's a really good way of describing what it is. Because I have a lot of people that are like, well, what do you mean that they, are running the title? Or what
Yeah.
does that mean that we're waiting for it to come back? Or what is, they ask a lot of questions, especially first time home buyers.
There's
So
a
many
really
questions.
common misnomer, and that's like
Mhm.
there's like some database that really like stores all the information about like the title to a property.
Yeah.
There's just not. In North Carolina, there's a register of deeds, and that
Yeah.
will register, the deed and all kinds of other information that's
Hmm.
super important. But when
Hmm.
my title researchers spend a lot of time doing things like searching, was a bankruptcy filed, a federal
Yep.
bankruptcy filing? What is there a water lien against the property because this person didn't pay their water bill last month?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like those things are all things that kind of go into title. And it really hits on that core question I mentioned earlier is, does the seller have the ability and the authority to sell the property to the buyer? Because
Yeah.
we can't get over that threshold issue, then the transaction is never going to happen. So that's really what it boils down to, if you could put it in one sentence.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. You did a great job of explaining that, and I think that'll help a lot of folks. So when you have a first time home buyer, what what advice would you give them? As an attorney when they're out looking or starting to look, or just through the process, what would you give them as a good advice as being on as
Yeah.
a closing attorney?
Yeah, first time home buyers.
Mhm.
We love first time home buyers. We
Yeah.
get to do almost every day. We get to see a first time home buyer too, and
Mhm.
it's always funny because you can almost always tell, right?
Yeah.
Like they walk in, they're scared, like they're like, this is a
Yeah.
law office. Is like,
Yeah.
relax. It's not that serious. Like,
It's a
and
party.
for a lot of them, they're spending more money than they'll ever have. Like
Yeah.
it's a good it's a exciting and also kind of scary exercise.
Yeah.
So if I had to give advice, the I guess the first thing, and this is a general piece of advice that I already mentioned, you have
Yeah.
to have good people in your camp, have a really good real estate agent, have someone who knows what they're doing. That is it's a game changer. The folks that are first timers that try to do it without a real estate agent are crazy, and
Yep.
I can tell you because they come into our office to close transactions, it is a mess almost always, and they almost always lose out on the back end because they have not gotten the representation they need. So that might be the obvious answer is, hey, make sure you have a good real estate agent.
Yeah.
Um, for me, first time home buyer, like one of the things when I bought my home the first time that
Mhm.
I didn't really realize is you really have to look at the transaction as a whole with
Mhm.
from a bigger picture. And
Yeah.
so just to give you an example, and I'll use my house as an example.
Mhm.
When we got under contract, we thought it was a good price, and we had an appraisal done. The appraisal ended up being about 5,000 short of what it should
Oh,
be, and we panicked. We
yeah.
freaked. And transactionally, like it wasn't going to happen, and the seller was like, we're not really moving off of it. And we were like, we don't want to come off of $5,000 to make this deal if it's not worth it.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting with that for some time. We sat with it for about 24 hours. Like, I guess this isn't going to happen. It's
Yeah.
$5,000. And I know what advice you would give, but
Yeah.
this is the advice that I got. That was actually, I didn't get the advice. My wife and I kind of looked at each other, and we were kind of like, you know what? It's $5,000.
Mhm.
Like, that's nothing in the scheme of things. We really
Yeah.
like this house, and we bought it. Of course we bought it. And of course, as soon as we bought it, the market jumped up, and
Yeah.
it's been a no-brainer. But
Yeah.
the idea is don't get stuck in the myopia of the numbers and where you are today. This is your first home, and you're going to be hopefully buying more homes after this, or moving into something bigger and better. But at the very
Yeah.
least, this is going to change into something that's worth more. And so have that. You want to have the appropriate, like, have your pencil sharpened for the number, but also have the reverence of this is a thing that you're going to do. You won't do it many times in your life. A couple dollars is not going to make or break the deal.
Yeah.
Don't get hung up on the little things. This is a big thing. And so, especially if you like it, do it. Do
Yeah.
what needs to be done to get it.
Yeah, yeah, and really, we're not expecting. I mean, prices, home prices will go up and down, but I always ask everyone, how long are you gonna stay there? I mean, and we aren't expecting like doom and gloom. So,
No,
I mean, you'll get that 5,000 back
it's five
quickly.
thousand dollars.
I mean, yeah,
It was crazy because I mean,
yeah,
we bought right before the market just took off, and
mhm.
it was 6 months later we were getting letters in the mail for 100K more than we paid, and
Oh
it's
yeah,
like we would have been so dumb to not do it, and then we wouldn't have been in the house that we really liked.
yeah, no,
So,
definitely,
that's a big part of it too, is that, you always want to kind of get the emotion out of it a little bit, but you also sometimes you got to let the emotion kind of run, a little bit too.
yeah.
You don't let yourself get excited about it because it's an exciting thing.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. So, do you have a time where that you've seen where a real estate attorney has saved a deal? Um,
Mm.
I mean, can you have a good example of that that maybe, you
Yeah.
can explain
I
that?
mean, I could probably give you a dozen that have happened
Yeah,
in our
I
office in
figured
the
you
last
could.
6 months.
Yeah,
I've tried. I don't want to make this a braggy thing because I
yeah,
honestly I know a lot of attorneys can save deals, but it's
yeah,
one of the things we do really well. If I hear an agent calls me and goes, "Hey, this deal is dying because of this attorney," I'm like, "Give it to me. Like, we'll figure it out. We want to figure it
yeah,
out." So,
yeah.
we had one last week that was gonna fall over dead because the seller had they had an old deed of trust. It was like a 19, it was basically a late 1900s deed of
Hmm.
trust,
Yeah.
1990 or something like that. It wasn't quite enough time for it to fall off naturally because there's a rule that eventually they will go away. But
Hmm.
when the market fell out in '08, a lot of those lenders went out of business and they
Yeah.
just didn't bother messing with their deeds of trust.
Yeah.
So we brought it over here, and I have a really, like I told you, a really good seller team,
Yeah.
and they went to work on it, and they managed to get to the right person to get the deed of trust.
Hmm.
We actually had noticed that it was going to get satisfied, but it wasn't yet. So we had to then go to the title insurance company and negotiate with the title insurance company,
Yeah.
talk them into insuring over it, which they did because we have good relationships with them and they know that we will do it right.
Yeah.
And so we were able to save that one. We had another one last month that was this one happens all the time to us because our closing setup is I don't require everybody to walk into the office and close here at the
Yeah.
table. We handle remote closings are a good chunk of what we do.
Hmm.
And so with the remote closing setup, we had a transaction where um, so the seller, again, too much detail, the seller
Yeah.
is basically married, the buyer was pregnant, and they were trying to move into this house, and the
Oh wow.
seller was working on a cruise line on the Mississippi.
Oh wow.
And so the problem was they needed to move in, and the
Hmm.
seller could not get they were stuck on this cruise line working.
Yeah.
And so we managed to arrange, we arranged a notary to go out and meet the seller in between stops. So like where they dock at the port, they
Yeah.
literally ran out into the marina, found the notary in the marina, signed a POA so his wife could sign all the documents, got the POA to us, and we closed on time. And we did that. This is not an exaggeration, and I know I'm bragging, but we did that in a 3-day time frame. So in other words,
That's
we had the
crazy.
contract in day one, we closed it on day three,
That's crazy. That
and it
is
was
so
great.
crazy.
It
That's
was,
cool though. Yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome. You've done that a few times with for me. So I definitely know that that can happen because I've had that happen a few times.
yeah. People have weird circumstances and
Yeah.
things come up.
Yeah.
We had one last week. Buyer was like, they were going to Disney, and it's so funny. I know you know this. Like, people do the weirdest things around closing. They'll be
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, I'm going out of the country for 3
Yeah.
months." It's like, but I have to buy this house first. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
But they were going to Disney. They had a whole week set out in Disney, but they were like, "We really want to hit the road before 8 a.m. or else we're never going to get there in time to do all the things we want to do."
Yeah.
And so one of our team came in. We were in here at 6 a.m. closing paper, doing the whole open the office up, got the
Wow.
coffee going, and we closed it for them. And honestly, like those are fun transactions because we
Yeah.
get to really help people, which is, one of the things that attorneys like say they really want to do when they get into law school and they go into this business.
Yeah.
But one of the things they don't get to do a lot of, and we do, we get to really help people. So
Yeah.
those are always very fun.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I love those are like the best transactions when you really get
Yeah.
to help folks. So I get it. I totally get it. So, another question I have for you is what what advice do you give someone? It's totally another off topic from where we're at. But what do you that is considering buying or selling a property as is? I know we kind of went that direction, but you and I both know there's a lot of folks that
Yeah.
do are in that boat, especially
Yeah,
selling.
as is, we see a lot of as is transactions. We do actually do a lot of investor style work that is kind of as is.
Yeah,
Um, I think if you're going to buy, if you're going to sell as is, you have to realize that
yeah,
out of the gate, you're potentially devaluing what you can sell the property for, right?
yeah,
Um, on the flip side, if you're buying, there is you have to, when you go to do that first look at the property, you have to be really comfortable with what you're looking at.
yep,
Because oftentimes there will be things that aren't apparent.
yeah, yeah,
We call them latent defects and things you don't know
yep,
about. So you have
yep.
to be comfortable. And then especially for investors who don't do that, a lot of investors will buy sight unseen as
Thanks.
is,
Yeah,
and that's super risky. But here's the thing, it's high risk, high reward. So if you're
yep,
doing it and you're doing it at the right number, you understand that there is the risk that you're going to walk in and one of the floors has fallen in and you have to deal with that.
yep,
Don't get mad when that happens
yeah,
because you took it sight unseen as is. So,
yeah,
I don't recommend it, obviously, but I do think it's a tool, right? It's a tool for the right person to use in the right scenario.
yeah,
A seller, in the event that they really don't want to go through the experience of negotiating and dealing with the if or not,
hmm,
and a buyer, if they're trying to get a really good deal and
yeah.
they're not really worried about the repairs or things that could be done.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. So I have a couple more questions for you, and then we'll let you go.
Okay.
But what was, what was the most memorable challenge you've handled? Or just I guess you wouldn't. I mean, we're going to call it a party, not a case or transaction, but that that it was so important to have legal counsel on.
Uh,
That's a tough
um,
question.
yeah, it's a tough question because I mean, it happens.
There's a lot, probably.
Yeah, it really is. I literally just had an email from someone who was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that we did not do what they were suggesting." And
Yeah,
the really good answer to this is um, I've had a couple transactions over the years where people will walk in and um, they don't they're selling a piece of property and they just do not have an understanding of whether they own the property or not.
yeah,
And when that happens, I can tell you, because we do really thorough title research, like it's apparent to us usually pretty quickly. And
yeah.
sometimes those folks can be pushy. So
Hmm.
one that comes to mind, I had happen a couple months ago, it was like an investor style transaction. The seller
Hmm.
was an investor. They had bought the property from someone else. Well,
Oh,
when they
okay.
bought the property from someone else, it was a husband and wife that had gotten divorced.
Oh.
And as part of that divorce proceeding, there was a judgment in the divorce proceeding.
Mhm.
And basically, one spouse owed the other spouse money.
Mm.
And that was part of what was ordered. And so that
Mhm.
judgment in North Carolina attaches to the property that's owned in the state.
Yeah.
And the investor had bought it. They had bought it using an attorney that that didn't catch this judgment in the transaction. And honestly, I understand why the attorney didn't. It wasn't it wasn't
Yeah.
very obvious.
Yeah.
And it was a $30,000 situation where basically there's a $30,000 judgment. My buyer originally was slated to close with the same attorney that had closed it with the first transaction.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a good relationship with the real estate agent, and the real estate agent said, "This feels funny. I want Joe to close it." And it's a good thing she did, because I can
Yeah.
tell you, as soon as that wife found out that the property had been sold, she was going to place a lien on the property.
Mm.
And so the deal ended up dying because of it. And I hated that, because obviously the agent, I didn't get paid, nobody got paid, everybody was kind of
Yeah.
sad. But I can also tell you that if the transaction had gone through and we hadn't seen it, it would have cost my client $30,000. And honestly, they would have come to me and gone, "What the heck?" And I would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
So for me, those are the types of transactions that are kind of risky. I had another one that was really fun. I mean, it wasn't really fun, it was
Yeah.
awful. Last summer we did our title work, and my main title researcher came back and said, "Hey, so I can't tell for sure because we hadn't had a survey done yet.
Hmm.
Can't tell for sure, but I'm pretty sure about a third of this house is on a piece of property that is not owned by the seller."
Oh.
And the tax records had it owned by the seller, but it wasn't actually owned by the seller. And that
Oh,
happens.
wow. Yeah.
And it was awful. It really stunk. And the sellers had to hire an attorney.
Mm.
And we ended up closing this deal
Yeah.
about a year later. It took a
Oh,
whole year to get sorted out. The
yeah.
seller had to basically file a complaint in North Carolina to get it's what's called a quiet title action, to release the property to the
Yeah.
seller so the seller could sell it to my buyer. And in the meantime, we worked really hard and worked out basically a lease arrangement so that the buyer could move into the home and live there. We'd done all the other kind of legwork. And so we were waiting until that could get resolved before they could actually finish the transaction. So it ended up being very happy. We had to be very creative.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest with you, there are a lot of attorneys in our state that don't spend the time and actually draw out the property. It sounds crazy, but
Yeah.
actually draw it out.
Yeah.
And if my researcher had not drawn out the property, we would not have seen that. We just wouldn't have known it. And the prior attorney didn't. And
Wow.
I hate it for them because they had to fix all the mess.
Yeah.
But the reality is that's just kind of one of those things where we're able to really kind of provide a good service for folks, but also some creative solutions as we're going to try to make sure that the buyer gets what they need in the transaction.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Okay. One last question.
Sure.
When people are looking for a great attorney, what should they look for?
Okay.
Because I mean, we generally suggest folks,
Yeah, but
but
you don't always get to. Yeah.
yeah, we don't always get to. So
Yeah.
your thoughts?
So I think the question really comes to what's important to them.
Hmm.
And for us, our kind of mainstay is that we really highly value communication.
Hmm.
We highly value flexibility and adaptability.
Hmm.
We highly value integrity in our transactions and making sure we're doing right by our clients.
Yeah.
And so for us, that's the core of like Atlas Orange, of our principles.
Yeah.
Um, there are some folks who will walk into the office and go like, "I don't like the loosey goosey vibe in here. I wanted
Yeah.
everybody to have a tie on and to have
Yeah.
a suit."
Hmm.
And that's fine. Like there are people that want to do that, and that good. Like go find an attorney that does that. That is not going to be
Yeah.
us. But if you want someone kind of along the lines of like, "Yes, we can figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
Yes, you have accessibility to talk to me." Or talk to one of our attorneys. We also, for us, I've got 30 people working here.
Yeah.
So,
You've got a
when
lot.
you call, like you get to talk to somebody and get some answers,
Yeah.
even if it's, "Hey, let me find out,"
Yeah.
you have that kind of accessibility level. So we really value that, and kind of put that at the forefront. But to answer your question in terms of what they should be looking for, obviously they should look for someone who has experience and knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Um, but outside of that, it really is important that they look at what's important to them,
Yeah.
what are they looking for in an experience. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. Well, Joe, thank you so much for
Yeah.
spending all this time with us today and just kind of going over general real estate law questions and all the general stuff that, the average, a new home buyer or
Mhm.
just any buyer or seller really has questions about, and that might be helpful for them, especially out of state sellers and buyers. But thank you again for all your
Right.
time.
Yeah,
And
glad to do it anytime,
thank
anytime. I'm
you.
glad to help. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully you can come on and we can talk about different topics. We'll dive
Yeah,
into some more
yeah.
fun,
We'll have to
crazy
play
topics.
Stump the Attorney. We'll have to get
Yeah.
some good stuff going, and
Yeah.
I can really flex
Yeah.
the legal knowledge a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But all of Joe's information and Atlas Orange information will be down below in the comments. So if you have any questions or would like their information as well, you can always DM me or reach out to me and then I will hook you up with their
Yeah.
information. But thank you again, Joe, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks so much, Carrie.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
bye.